So how do you develop more active communicators? The things that you want to stop doing. You want to stop asking questions. Stop using so much language. Stop direct prompting and stop responding to non-communicative speech. Now I know, this is when I went to go get certified and they said stop asking questions. I was like, what do you mean? Stop asking questions. How do you stop asking questions? But if you think about it in static versus dynamic communication and language as only a piece of the puzzle, language in the human experience is to share with other people. It's not always used to answer a question, to ask a question, to get a specific response from a person. So if the only language that your child is exposed to is instrumental, they're not learning the true value of communication, the true value of what you're utilizing language for.
Can you explain what responding to non-communicative speech?
Any kind of like scripting, or I have a lot of kids that have, and you'll see in one of the videos, he says, Daddy fast run, Daddy fast run. And before they came to do RDI, that was the only interaction that they had. He'd say, Daddy fast run, Daddy fall down, Daddy shake no. And Dad would do it because that's the only way that he knew how to interact with his son. So that it's non-communicative speech. It's very controlling, it's very static. He's expecting a very, very specific response. So his language isn't valuable to communication with another person. Okay? So some of the things you want to start doing, start commenting on actions, on your opinions, on things that you like and things that you dislike, because then you're going to be showing your child a true value of language is to share with other people. So you want to not utilize it to produce a response necessarily, but just start commenting on things a little bit more often. Instead of using so much language, you want to create a primarily visual environment instead of always giving the auditory information. So, my friends here, turn around a second. If I said, give me that water bottle. Get that. Right, okay, so now go back. And if I said, give me that, what do you have to do first?
Yes.
You have to look and check in and figure out what it is. So instead of prompting the eye contact first, like, look at me, give me the water bottle, now you've created a reason for them to look, and you're teaching them how to read nonverbal communication. So if they always get the auditory information, they never need to monitor their communication environment. Okay? Prompting. So instead of using a direct prompt, so instead of, say, pretend we're sitting at a table, instead of give me the water bottle, it would be, gosh, I'm thirsty. And you're teaching them inferential language as well as innuendo, and you're just giving them an extra step of processing to practice processing instead of just giving them the answer to the question or the answer to the solution to a problem. Go ahead.
How does this work when you have a child who's not completely verbal and doesn't understand a lot of these words?
Doesn't understand it or doesn't use them? Doesn't understand it?
If they can't communicate, you don't know if they understand it.
I would get them proficient in nonverbal communication. I mean, one of the first things I tell parents to do is shut up, stop talking.
I wish I had to say that. I would be so excited.
Yeah. Stop, like, completely.
But I would say it, I'd be jumping up and down.
The only thing that should be coming out of your mouth would be experience sharing stuff. Like, wow, that was so fun. I love bananas, whatever it may be. Especially kids that are nonverbal or that have poor receptive language. Get them proficient in nonverbal communication, and once they're proficient in communication, because it's so dynamic and because they probably feel so incompetent because they can't read all of that information simultaneously, the motivation to learn language and to utilize it and try to understand it will just naturally kind of occur. Does that make sense? Communication is the hardest thing for parents and therapists, speech therapists, to change. But it's really what you can utilize throughout your whole day that will make the most impact, because you're using it all day long. And you can do it. It does happen. So here's an example of, here's the video. here's an example of a child. This is their baseline measurement, so this is before they did any RDI, of a mom that I told to stop talking so much.
Yeah, we don't have to say cheese. Okay, ready? Now what we're going to do is we're going to make a salad. Yeah. And what, can you read this for me? What do you need? Okay. Where's the third last bowl?
You have to first slow down. She talks very, 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 very fast. So for Olivia here to understand all the language that's coming out of her mouth is very difficult. She's feeling very overwhelmed. And this is a compliant kid. She's not resistant to anything ever. She's completely anxious here because she just didn't understand what was being asked of her and it was just being fired at her so quickly. So here is Paige.
Well, have you ever wondered where you got those eyes and why you smile so big and bright? Have you ever wondered?
Again, the difference in the quality of their interaction by just assigning her a very, very basic role of being the person that throws laundry into the dryer. Now, laundry is not fun, so it's not about the task that she was having such a good time, it was about how they were doing it together. She was truly enjoying being with mom here. And also significant is that she threw in a wet sock or wet something, which she would be very resistant to touching due to sensory issues. But because the rest of the interaction and the environment wasn't so overwhelming and her anxiety wasn't so high, she was able to kind of work through it on her own without any real prompting or encouragement. She kind of, you can see her tense up a little bit, but she kind of regulated herself and realized that this is what is important. I'm having a good time here with mom. I don't need to pay attention to this. I can work this out on my own, and she was able to do that. Worked down on the bed and started talking. Did it change? Did the quality of their interaction change, become different? We started asking the questions, expecting a specific response all of a sudden. Feedback was very different from Joey. Being asked questions, is this your knee? Is this your elbow? I have a boo-boo. Do you have a boo-boo? Where's your boo-boo? On your elbow? No, that's not your elbow, that's your knee. So all of a sudden we're back into that static pattern of asking questions and expecting a specific response. This is a kid that's been labeling body parts since he was 2.5 years old. So think about it in terms of how confident would you feel if I kept asking you questions that you know the answer to. So if you know that your child knows all of his colors and has been labeling them forever, probably, if that's what you resort to, how confident does that make him feel? Because he probably knows, he or she probably knows that you already know that he knows that. So think about it in terms of that when you feel yourself falling into that pattern. And then when he got up from that position and said, "Daddy, high five," there's your initiation. I mean, that's on IEPs all over the place. Initiates social interaction. There it is. And that's just because he set up a dynamic activity that he felt confident and had fun at doing. And that's all it really took. I'm going to skip a couple of these in the interest of time. But so co-regulation, you typically have two ends of the spectrum. You either have a passive and prompt-dependent child or you have a controlling and rigid child. So in order to establish co-regulation, that piece in the middle, the passive and prompt-dependent child has to come up with something on his own, has to feel that he or she is able to bring something to the table to make that interaction valuable to both parties. And the controlling and rigid child needs to give up some of that control and understand that I can manage the uncertainty of this other person, my partner, bringing something to the table, and I don't need to control everything all the time. So here's Jake. This is their first assessment. We saw him a little